Caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't know possible. Tia Walker. Hello, Truth Seekers. You are listening to the Welcome to Your Life podcast. I am your host, Renee Reed. Welcome to Your Life is an Atlanta-based podcast for women over 40. If you're looking for tips on how to energize your health, relationships, and mindset, you've found your tribe. I'm on a mission to help women to live the life they deserve because life doesn't stop after 30. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you love. Our work continues because of your generous donations. For just 99 cents per month, you can help to keep the flow of ideas moving and changing our world. Thank you in advance for your support. You know, the opioid epidemic has caused great pains for families across our country. County welfare departments are stepping in to protect children when their parents are no longer able to care for them. But what's the best solution? On today's show, we dive into the kinship versus foster care debate and learn what resources are available to relatives who decide to take in the children of a family member in trouble. And we learn what you can do if someone from the Department of Children and Family Services knocks at your door. Our guest today is Lisa Cutner. Lisa is a 31-year veteran at the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services, where she serves as the Senior Manager of Foster and Adoptive Parent Recruitment Unit, as well as the Kinship Permanency Incentive Program. This is a state program created to support children in the homes of family or friends who have committed to caring for them when their birth parents cannot. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Cutner. Lisa has a master's degree in social work and 25 plus years experience working in the field of social services. Most recently, she has been training and recruiting foster parents. Kudos to her. And she is going to help us today to unpack this concept of kinship families and tell us a little bit about the hurdles that these families face. Now, I also work in the field of social services, and in the past, I have had the pleasure of working with both foster and kinship families. But what I am finding astounding is that the number of kinship families on my caseload and on the caseload of the other workers in my office has increased substantially. So Lisa is going to help us find out why that is happening because inquiring minds want to know. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I gave a really skeletal bio for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, you know, where you went to school and what exactly is your specific job title today?
Currently, I am the Senior Manager for Community Initiatives at the Cuyahoga County Division of Children and Family Services in Cleveland, Ohio. I've been doing this for about 30 years. I have my undergrad is in public administration from the University of Pittsburgh, and my master's in social work is from Case Western Reserve University. So I've been doing this for a while. I've been in child welfare most of my adult life. Most of my jobs were within this field, just in different areas. So I've done investigative work, work with families that have what we call ongoing cases. I've supervised that work, and currently I recruit foster and adoptive parents for Cuyahoga County. I am also, my department runs what's called the Kinship Permanency Incentive Program, which is a state stipend that's given to families that are caring for kin. I also manage our Kinship Daycare Program, which is a service that's specific to Cuyahoga County for kinship families. And I also manage the Community Partnership Program. So Cuyahoga County is very lucky in that we actually contract with community programs to provide services to families in their neighborhood. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with settlement houses. So we have a number of settlement houses here in Cuyahoga County, and we partner with them. They do a lot of grassroots work within individual communities.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's actually how I came into the field. I was actually working in insurance and started working with one of those community initiatives, which was the best job ever. But is this where you thought you would end up in your career? Is this the field of study that you wanted to pursue when you were in undergrad?
Not really. I really didn't. This was something that I'd end up doing. A lot of people come into this job thinking that they're going to do it temporarily. And I did too. There's a joke that if you don't get out in the first 5 years, you never do. So that's kind of what happened. But actually, my grandfather was a social worker. And so I think a lot of my training probably started with that. He was a social worker in the 60s and 70s. And social work back then was very different. It was felt more punitive to me, and people, had a lot of stigma attached to it. But my grandfather was a very kind, dear man. He was also a Baptist minister. And so one of the things, he had clients that called him at home all the time. And so one of the things he used to say is, we had to be really polite when we answered the phone, because he said, you don't know what the person on the other end is going through, but for the grace of God, it could be you or your family member. So just be polite. And I think that that's something that's carried with me throughout my career. I always think no matter what's going on, the person is at least due respect.
Wow, that is awesome. And, I don't think that people really understand the amount of work that is heaped onto a social worker. Actually, and that's one of the what I'm studying in my doctoral program. I'm looking at burnout in social workers and why there is such a high turnover rate. Why do you think there is such a high turnover rate for people in the field? And are there more men in the field now than there used to be, or is this still considered a female career?
I think there's more men than there used to be, but it is still predominantly female. As far as why there's burnout, it's a very intense job. You think about somebody right out of college, 23, 24 years old, and they're making decisions that affect people's lives for the rest of their lives, the children, the families, and it can burn you out quickly. A lot of people who come into this field do it because they want to help people. If you don't have enough balance, then that can burn you out. It can burn you out really fast. One of the things that I tell them is to try very hard not to take it home, which is almost impossible. But you have to figure out self-care. So it wasn't really that term back 30 years ago when I was a young social worker. But it's something that is tremendously important. You have to be able to decompress when you come home, to get your mind off of some of this, or it will just affect you, and not in a good way.
And not in a good way. And that's so true, because I'm finding through my research that you have a lot of social workers who are, battling diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, obesity. I mean, when you think about it, 90% of your day is in your car. Mm-hmm. And so self-care then becomes really important in, learning how to handle the stress of the job, and also how to manage just something simple as lunch so that you're not eating fast food every day.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
there's a lot
really
more literature, and there's a lot more training that we provide social workers now around self-care and things like compassion fatigue. I'm so sorry, that's my dog.
We love dogs on this show.
Having a little compassion fatigue right now.
Okay.
Well, we one of the things my agency does, and I think most agencies do it now, is that they provide a certain amount of training that is really meant for self-care and to help workers recognize the symptoms and signs of going through compassion fatigue and being overstressed, and learning how to do things that help them, and in the long run it helps the families that they're servicing. So that's probably one of the biggest changes, I think, over the last 30 years that I've seen.
Okay, and you mentioned before that when your grandfather was in the field, that social work seemed to be a little bit more punitive than it is now. Can you tell us when that started to change, and how is it different specifically than it was in the past?
Well, I think there were things like, I remember my grandfather saying things like he would go to houses and he was supposed to look for like men's shoes under the bed or men's clothing in the closet if people were getting aid, to make sure that there, it wasn't a two-parent household and things like that. I think that's not really an expectation now. For my agency, we actually, for the last 20 years, have practiced something called Family to Family. It was developed by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and they came in and started to help us make some changes. My agency had a lot of really bad publicity, and so one of the things that I think we started to realize at that point was that it really does take a community to raise a child and to protect the child. And right. So we felt like we needed to include the community. When kids are taken out of their home, out of their neighborhood, a lot of times neighborhoods don't know what happened to them. Teachers don't know what happened to those children. Neighbors don't know what happened to those children. And we found that that's not good for the neighborhoods, and it's not good for the child. Child is a part of the community. They're not just part of the family. They've got friends, things that they were doing, groups that they might have been participating in. And so over the years, we realized that you need to encompass all of that when you're looking at a child's well-being. And so that's one of the things that I'm actually very, very proud of my agency and having been a part of that type of work. We like to say nothing about them without them. So we try to make decisions with the families, with the child's safety at the forefront. We want them to participate in making plans that help keep their children safe whenever we can. And we don't want to sneak up on people. We have what's called staffings when it's time to remove a child, and we bring everybody to the table. We bring as many people as we can to the table to talk about it and say, these are the things that we think are making this child unsafe. How can we fix that? Can we fix that and let the child stay in the home? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As I said, in the forefront is always the child's safety. So we do believe that a child belongs in their home or with their family as long as it's safe for them to do that. And so that's kind of where kinship care comes in.
Yes, and I love what you said about it taking a whole community to raise a child. I know for many people, they're tired of hearing about the village. It takes a village, but it really does take a village of concerned adults to raise a child who is going to grow and be productive and happy and thrive in a society, especially with so many things happening in our world today that could derail their progress. And so I know one of the things that I really like that you guys do is that you do have the community organizations come in. And those community organizations also invite other people, like the child's coach or their teacher or the pastor of their church, so that you are getting a more comprehensive plan that includes the child's whole well-being. So it's more of a holistic approach to social work, which is what I love.
And if you think about it, kinship care isn't new, and neither is the idea of the community or the village raising a child. If you think back, I know when I was a kid, if I did something wrong, any adult in my community could really correct it. There was an expectation that happened. You could get disciplined starting at the top of the street and all the way down. And if somebody
exactly,
then they addressed it. And the same thing with providing care. If something happens and a parent couldn't care for a child for whatever reason, there was always family or what we call fictive kin, which is like the neighbor or the lady that everybody calls grandma, that would step in and provide care, and that's through all different cultures and communities. So it's not really a new idea. It kind of feels like at some point, for whatever reason, people thought that was not a good thing, that families got more isolated, moving and being transient, and I think that kind of deteriorated some of that notion.
So tell us, what's the difference between kinship care and foster care?
Well, foster care is a formalized care for a child. So after a child has been removed from their parent for any number of reasons by the state or the county, depending on where you live, foster parents are people that have been specially trained and are paid to provide care for the child. And let me rephrase that. So they're given a stipend to help take care of the child. It's not a paycheck. It's money that you're supposed to use to provide for things for the child, food, clothing, things like that. Kinship care is when a relative or someone close to the child, for whatever reason, is willing to take them into their home and take care of them in absence of the parent. And that has been happening a lot. The 2010 census showed that there are 7.8 million children that live with a relative as head of the household. And 2.5 million of those kids are in a home that does not have a bio parent.
Wow. And then what are you seeing or what types of situations are occurring that would cause a child to be removed from the care of their parent, their biological parent?
Well, for Cuyahoga County, we look at whether or not a child is safe. So there are a number of reasons that a child might be at risk in their home or their community. And poverty, lack of education, lack of services, those kind of things from community can sometimes raise the risk factor. We don't look at removing a child from the home unless there's a safety issue. So if there's something that affects the safety of the child, domestic violence, where that's happening and the child is present in the home, significant drug use that causes a parent to be unable to provide for their child or meet the needs of their child. So it's usually something fairly serious that happens. A parent may die and not have made plans for them. Parent that may have dies in a car accident or something like that. So there's a number of different reasons why a child may come into the system.
So when a child comes into the county custody, do you automatically first look for relatives to take care of them before placing them into the foster care program?
Yes. So there are state laws as well as federal guidelines that make it a necessity that we have to look for family first, and we have to look for a family that can meet the rules and guidelines and be able to provide care for a child. But we are required to look for a family member first.
Okay. And have you found that with the opioid crisis that we're facing in America today, that has had some impact on the families that you find coming to your agency for services?
Yes, actually, and it's been kind of cyclical. Back in the 80s, 90s, it was more of the crack epidemic, so we saw, a lot of families that were devastated by that, and the same thing is going on now with the opiate crisis. Grandparents are stepping up and trying to make sure that their grandchildren or their nieces or nephews, their neighbors, making sure that they're taken care of because their parents can't. Parents get involved in drugs and illicit activities and sometimes have to go to jail for a number of years. And so we want to make sure that the child actually has a permanent situation to live in so that they can grow and develop.
And if I, for some reason, had wanted to or needed to become the primary caretaker for my grandsons, is there something, would I need to apply to become their caregiver? Are there background checks? What would I have to do to qualify?
Well, so there's different kinds of kinship care. So there's informal and formal. So informal is when the parent makes an arrangement with a family member themselves. So if your daughter and son-in-law are in the service, and so they get called up and have to go overseas, they can't necessarily take their child with them. They can make a plan and plan to leave their child with you and let you provide care for them. Or someone that you're very close to, maybe from your church, a family that you were involved with, and something happens and the parents can't take care of the child any longer. They can make their own private arrangement with you to take care of them. There's also more formalized kinship care where you might be given temporary guardianship. Guardianship, at least in Cuyahoga County, is like a contractual relationship. So we would go down to the court and we would file papers, and it would say that I want you to act as my child's guardian until such time as I feel I'm able to do it. So those are pretty much the way that that kinship can come about.
And then once the child is placed with, a grandparent or aunt or a cousin, are these family members, do they have to go through any training, or would that just be more for the more formal?
Well, so for formal kinship care where the Child Welfare Agency has been involved, we do have to do background checks and ensure that the child, the situation that we're putting the child in is going to be safe for them, and that the caregivers are able to take care of them. And then we actually go to court and give what's called legal custody. So legal custody is meant to be a permanent arrangement. One of the things that child welfare has found that it's not good for kids to linger in any temporary situation for too long, because it doesn't provide them an opportunity to really thrive and grow, because they're not necessarily sure where they're going to be from week to week or day to day. So we generally consider that more of a permanent situation. And we have to make sure that the child is taken care of. So in those formal kinship care arrangements, we might actually be working with the parent still, a parent that may have had, say, a drug problem. So while the parent is in drug treatment and working what's called a case plan that we've developed with them, we may place the child with a relative, and we provide care for the child. So we would, at that point, the child would be in the custody of the state or county. In our situation, it's the county. And they'd be placed with a relative, so we'd be responsible for clothing, for making sure the child goes to school. If the child has any kind of special needs, making sure that those are addressed. So that's more of what the formal kinship is. For those situations, at least in Cuyahoga County, we do allow our kinship care providers can actually participate in any of the training that we offer our foster families. So we do try and provide some services for them. Cuyahoga County also has a daycare program that we provide for our kinship caregivers while the child is in the agency's custody. And it doesn't depend on your income. So we believe that if the family member is trying to step up and help us send the child back to their family, then we want to provide them as much help as we possibly can. The unfortunate thing is for kinship caregivers, there aren't a lot of monetary benefits that they can get. They can get usually what's called child-only benefits. So it's a very small stipend, again, not dependent on your income, that you get for taking care of the child. It's not as much as you would get as a foster parent, unfortunately.
And that was going to be my next question. Do you think because kinship families are not, compensated, is it harder to get them to agree to step up to take care of this child, or do you find that many of them are altruistic?
It's the exact opposite.
Okay.
Your family will step up because they're making decisions based on their heart. So if I show up at your door, even for a family member that you might not know very well, and I say, something happened and I need you to take care of your great niece. If you don't, then I'm going to have to put her in foster care. Most people will say yes without any thought, which is not the greatest thing sometimes.
Okay.
Because you make the decision based on your heart without consulting your head, and you don't consider things like housing or food. How are you going to feed this child? How are you going to clothe them? How are you going to get medical care? How are you going to afford some of those things? So a lot of family members will just immediately say yes, and then, say that they'll figure it out later, but later is usually like 2 days after the child is in your care. And unfortunately, a lot of our kinship families don't have the resources that they would need in order to take a child in the home. I have 2 nephews and a niece. If something had happened, and I had a pretty decent job, my husband and I both did, but if you had brought 3 more kids to my home, I would have struggled. And so people don't necessarily think about that when they make that decision.
And that's so true. Like, I've had clients who said, yes, I'll definitely take them, but then they're, forgetting, I have to work 8 to 5, and this kid has to go to school. What am I going to do with them after school? now I have to pay for, not just an after-school program, but now I have to pay for recreational activities and just things like getting their hair cut or getting their hair done, or just, things that you would pay that are associated with having a kid that you didn't expect to be raising. And do you find that how many of those families then, after they made this big, magnanimous decision to bring the child into their home and to care for them, and then when they realize, oh, this is going to be more than our bargain for, how many calls do you get saying you're going to have to make other arrangements?
We get a few. We do get a few. And it's unfortunate because kinship care is really the best situation for a child who can't remain with their parents. It has so many benefits for the child. It's usually a more permanent situation. So for however long the child needs to be there because they can't care for their parents can't care for them. It minimizes the trauma. You think about a child being removed from their home and then in what is usually some kind of traumatic event, and then being taken from everything that you know and placed with strangers. So it's an additional trauma. But being able to keep them in the family can lessen that sometimes. And it promotes things like sibling ties. So it's much more likely that a family member will take a sibling group and not have to have them separated. Whereas with foster care, sometimes we can't always find a foster parent that's willing to take 4 or 5 siblings. And we really want to try and keep siblings together. Even if it's a couple of family members that take them, it's family members. So there's still that tie, that bond. There's usually increased visits, things like that. So we value kinship care. We just haven't found a way necessarily to make it more appealing or more viable for family to be able to do that. One of the things that we provide at our agency is a very small stipend called the Kinship Permanency Incentive. So once you get custody of a family member, you get a total of 8 checks over the course of 4 years. So you get 2 checks a year. The first one is $525, and then the next 7 are $300. But you get them at 6-month intervals. So every little bit helps when you're raising children, but that really is not enough necessarily to make a big difference. And it's per child.
Oh,
but
okay.
Still, if you have 5 children, $300 each every 6 months isn't necessarily that much money.
Right. And then are there other things that the kinship caregiver can apply for? Are they eligible to apply for things like, food stamps or medical benefits?
Well, they'll get medical for the child, but the food stamps is dependent on the family's income. So they look at your community at your family table. So it's based on how many people are in the family and the family's income. The child-only benefits isn't based on the family's income. It's just it's a monthly stipend that you get to provide care for the child.
And if the caregiver, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the thing about the child-only benefit, though, is unlike the kinship permanency incentive, so the first one you get is, and I don't know the exact amount for Ohio, but the first part you get, say you get $250, and then if you get another child, if there's 2 children, you don't get another $250. You may get only another $100. And then if there's a third child, you may only get $50 additional. So it's not, again, better than nothing, but sometimes it's not necessarily enough to really be able to care for a child.
So if you have been approached by social services to take a child in and you decline, are you able to visit that child while they're in foster care, or can they come to visit you while they're in foster care?
So one of the things that we try to tell families is if you can't actually take the child in, we really would prefer that you tell us the truth about that. But that doesn't mean that you're going to lose touch with the child, and we certainly don't want the child to lose touch with you. We would make arrangements for the child to be able to visit. For older kids in particular, this is really important. We want them to maintain family ties. And long term, if a child stays in the system and then ages out of our system, they're going to go back to family. We want them to be able to have ties with family that are still going to be supportive to them. Everybody needs somebody to encourage them and let them know that they care about them. And these kids are no different. They still need that connection, that family tie. And for older kids, even ones that are adopted, they know where they came from. So you want to promote good family connections and relationships with family members that are supportive of them.
That's awesome. I know that I had a family on my caseload, and they were very close with the foster family so that the child was able to have birthday parties and invite their family member to Chuck E. Cheese. And I think it also helps with that family connection. It helps with the adjustment of the child in foster care, because foster care can be very devastating for a child regardless of their age. So having that family connection, like you said, is very, very important to the child's adjustment, to their well-being, to their sense of safety, and cuts down on the behavioral problems that the foster parent may experience if there is another family member involved.
I am so sorry, my dog's so excited.
That's fine. My dog is asleep. That's the only reason you don't hear him. So you mentioned before that there is a reunification plan in place to kind of reunite the child with their biological parents. How are those plans created?
So in Cuyahoga County, they're called case plans. So what it is we take a look at what was the situation that caused the child to be removed from the home. What were the situations, and how can we make an adjustment to that to make the situation safe for the child? So if it was, say, drug use, then we'll sit down with the parent and say, you weren't able to meet your child's needs because of your drug use. So we try and refer them to drug treatment, help them with aftercare, and see if we can help them improve the situation so that it's no longer unsafe for the child. Our case plans, when a child is removed from the home, are actually court orders. So the case plan becomes something that the parent actually has to do. Their failure to do it would be a reason for us to terminate parental rights. Well, let me rephrase that. So their failure to participate in services and make appropriate changes. So it's not just about them attending a 16-week parenting program. We want to see them make changes to how they're interacting with the child, and changes to the situation that will make it safe for their child to be able to come home.
So have you, I'm sure you have, but when parents are not able to, meet the requirements of the case plans, is there a time limit that they have, or, is it just an ongoing situation?
No,
what
so one
happens?
of the things in Cuyahoga County, parents have up to 2 years. One of the things that we've learned over the course of time is that it is not good for a child to just linger. We want, if a child is removed from their parent, we want them to go back as soon as it's safe, and we really want parents to make changes so that it's safe for their child to come home as soon as possible. So in Cuyahoga County, you have up to 2 years. You have a court hearing every 6 months, and the court takes a look at what you've done along with your case plan and to make things better for your child or to make the situation more safe. So after the first 6 months, they take a look at what you're doing. And if you're not doing anything, anywhere along the line of those 2 years, the agency can make a decision and say, this parent is not doing enough or isn't doing anything to change their situation, to improve the situation so their child can go home. So we could then file for permanent custody. If permanent custody is granted, then the parental rights are terminated and children go up for adoption at that point.
And is there an age limit for adoption, or is it just under 18?
So kids in our system, kids can stay in the system until they're 21. So
okay.
Technically, you could be adopted after 18, but for the most part, it really is something that takes place from 0 to 18. I have seen some situations where an adult has decided to adopt a child who's over 18.
Wow, that's so awesome to be able to give that child a family, even at that age, because technically society says that they're an adult, but,
Society actually took a really hard look at it. No one in society has ever left their home at 18 and been able to take care of themselves.
Right.
I've never met the person that was able to do that. So
I know.
It's unfortunate, but we expect as a society, family is your safety net. And so, you walk around and your kids are saying, I'm 18, I'm grown, but they know if something happens, they can always go home. That's not the situation for some of the kids in our system, and it's unfortunate. And we really want kids to have a permanent situation and to have a forever family. We want every child that ends up in our system to have somebody that they can fall back on, that they can go and say, wow, this isn't really working out for me right now. Can I come home? You think about how often in our lifetime that happens. And it's just one of the hardest things to see some of our kids age out of the system and not have that.
And that brings me to my next, question. I have a couple of kids who are, aging out of foster care, and one is set to go to college. The other one, we're still trying to figure out their future. What do we do with these, thousands of children that are aging out of foster care each year?
There are some programs that are in place to provide them some assistance. Some of them, if they're in school, they can get stipends to help them with school. Cuyahoga County is very blessed in that they have a relationship with Cleveland State and our community college, Tri-C, that provides some help and services for our kids. But unfortunately, statistically speaking, a lot of these kids don't fare well. We have a fabulous program actually in Cuyahoga County called Open Table. So it's a program for our kids that are 18 and over, where an organization, more often than not, it's a church, forms what's called a table. And so they're like the board of directors for the child, who is the CEO. And so they help the child with different areas of their life. And it helps because sometimes when you have some of these kids and they have so many needs and things going on, it can burn out one person if you just have a mentor. With the open table concept, you have 5 or 6 people that are committed to trying to help this child improve their situation, make better decisions, network. So it's actually pretty fabulous for our kids that can get a table. And so, our director and our director of Health and Human Services are really committed to all of our kids that are aging out, at least trying to develop tables for them so that they have some kind of support. And you can find Open Table online if anybody is interested in that.
Yes, I was going to say, because that is a really good, the concept is awesome because, like you said, it's not putting the brunt of the burden on one person. There's several people there that the child can turn to, but also and collaborate with to, make a plan for their future so that no one is feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's been good. I've heard different people who are on the table saying that it's kind of opened their eyes to a lot of things that they might have heard or seen on TV or in the media, but didn't necessarily, I don't want to say they didn't believe it, but participating in some of this brings some of those things that they hear about, injustices that happen to some of our youth, to light. And so it becomes real for them. And they're able to help kind of make changes. So it's just a really wonderful program.
That's great. And, I want to just go back a little bit to something you said about families becoming more isolated, because I'm thinking, when you see a family in trouble, before they get to the point where they need a great program like Open Table or even the Kinship program, if a family member sees that someone in their family, their sister or niece or whomever, is suffering or in crisis, what should they do? I know a lot of family members try to handle things in-house. That was the case in our family, probably in yours. What happens in this house stays in this house. But when should they realize that they can't handle it, whatever the situation is, and reach out to your agency for assistance?
So one of the things people sometimes fail to realize is that child welfare agencies aren't there just to come in and remove children. We really would prefer to work with families before situations get that out of hand. So you can call our kids hotline. A lot of times, at least in Cuyahoga County, there are different programs that they could refer your family to or tell you where you can go to get help. 211 is a wonderful service here. If there's a service that you believe the family might be able to benefit from. But call and talk to a social worker on the hotline. They can tell you whether it's something that you might need some more help with. Families can call in themselves. if mother is in a situation where maybe there's domestic violence in the house, she can call and ask for help, ask for services to try and get out of that situation. A parent that is overwhelmed with a child's behavior can call us before, it gets so far out of hand that other people are calling, and just call and say, I need some help. There's a lot of different community services, at least in Cuyahoga County, that we can make referrals to before it gets out of hand.
So you're at your house, one Thursday morning, and you get a knock on the door, and it's, someone from Department of Family and Children's Services. What should that, mom or dad do in that instance?
Listen to what the allegations are. Truth is always stranger than fiction. So people sometimes see things that are out in the community, or something that they may perceive that's a problem with the family, and with all good intention to make sure that the child is safe, call social services to go out and check and just make sure that maybe what they saw isn't necessarily real or isn't really a problem. And again, families are struggling, so child care is one thing that is extremely expensive. And so parents come up with creative ways to work around having a child maybe go to daycare or have a babysitter because they're working late or have different shifts. So what we really want to do is hear what your story is and why it's that way. And then maybe we can help you come up with a better plan that provides more security for your child. But always explain. You don't want the social worker to have to guess. If they tell you, we got a referral that you're leaving your child home alone and your child is 6, talk to us. And again, maybe we can help you figure something out. That's not appropriate, but maybe we're hearing that, but what we don't know is that, your brother comes in at 8 o'clock. You leave for work at 4 o'clock. Your brother comes in at 8 o'clock and then stays there till the morning. That's not an ideal situation in any way, shape, or form, but it does show that you were trying to make some kind of plan. And again, maybe we can help you figure something out that makes more sense and makes your child be safe.
Thank you so much. And I know, getting that knock on the door or getting a knock from any official agency can, really throw a family into a tailspin. Sometimes they become very defensive. And so you're right, instead of clamming up and just shutting down, it's important that they learn to advocate for themselves and to tell their story so that, so that the worker has the entire picture and not just bits and pieces from several different sources.
Well, and so to other sources, because we want to make sure that we actually do get the whole story and make sure to the best of our abilities that the child is going to be safe. But we really want to get the bulk of our information from the family.
This has been so great, and I really, I don't have 30 years. I'm coming up on 10, but I just want to thank you for the work that you do. I know that, you do bring it home. I had a case that I brought home every day to the point that my husband was, I think he was wearing earplugs because this is, this is the kind, I think in any field where you are caring for people, whether you are a nurse or a teacher or in social services, it's just hard to break that line between work and home. It's not like, other jobs where you're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock and I'm off. Sometimes you will have clients calling you way after 5 o'clock because they're in crisis, and you have to make a plan for them, even though, technically you're off, but really if you have a caseload of 20 or 30 families, you're probably not off, really, in reality.
That is very, very true. I just want to tell you, Liz, just one other thing. So there is a website called the Child Welfare Information Gateway. And if you go to that website and put in Kinship Caregivers, there's a publication that will come up. It's from May 2016, but it has some really good information. If you're a family that's involved with the child welfare system, things that you need to ask when you're going to court. It explains some of the services that you may or may not be able to access in your area. So if you want to find out some more information or you're in that situation, I would highly recommend that you take a look at that website.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And if someone wanted to look into the Kinship, becoming part of a Kinship program or becoming a foster parent, where should they begin their research?
So for foster parenting, you should start with your child welfare agency in your jurisdiction and give them a call. We do our own training. For Cuyahoga County, you require 36 hours of training before you become a foster parent. They're going to come out to your home, make sure you have room. They'll ask you a million questions that you never thought anyone would ask you to make sure that this is something that you really want to do.
And when you become a foster parent, I think maybe some people may not realize this, you can specify what age range you would like to foster. Is that correct?
That is correct. You can decide to do infants, you can do toddlers, elementary school, teenagers. So there's a variety of age groups that you can say that you want to do. You can also pick boys or girls, wherever you think that you would be the most suited.
Great, awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question now that I ask everyone who comes on the show. In your opinion, and you have a vast array of knowledge, what do you think that we as a society, as individuals traveling, in the world today, what is one thing that you think we can do to create peace?
To create peace. One thing is kind of one of the things that my grandfather said. You need to be kind to one another because, but for the grace of God, there go I. You never know why a person is in the circumstance that they are. So just take a minute and be kind. You don't know what one kind word, how that would shape or may shape somebody else's day, somebody else's life, somebody else's situation. That's all I got.
And that was wonderful. Thank you. And that is so true. Just a small act of kindness can change the trajectory of a person's whole day. And I totally agree with you. And I just want to thank you for what you do. And I know that there are not enough foster homes or trained foster parents or kinship homes in our country. And so it's just good to know that you and people like the ones you have on your staff are out there fighting the good fight for the children in our communities. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Wow, today's show was packed with so much information. I want to thank Lisa again for being on the show and sharing her knowledge with us. If you are concerned about the children of a family member in trouble, call your local Department of Children and Family Services hotline. They will send someone out to check on the welfare of the children and determine if there is a crisis. I want to invite you to subscribe to the show, and until next time, wishing you peace and love. Bye for now.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.